a golf instruction could probably fill several medical textbooks on how the hips are supposed to turn. But right after this, I'm going to show you, I'm going to demonstrate just exactly what I think the best way to move the hips is for the most distance and accuracy. So don't go away. Hey, I'm Steve with HitItLonger.com, and hey, my channel just might be your ticket to hitting longer and straighter drives. And so if that's something you'd like, then please consider hitting the subscribe button for all the notifications of my future content. If you follow my channel, you know that I'm a advocate of the Mike Austin principles of swinging a golf club. Mike Austin was in the Guinness Book for hitting the longest drive in a round of tournament golf at 515 yards. And he did it at the age of 60, so he really knew what he was doing. It wasn't really totally an accident. And Mike had a very distinct, very unique way of moving the hips, which also allowed the shoulders to work in a similar fashion. It's not something that you see a lot of on TV necessarily, but nevertheless, I still think it's the best way of doing it. And using the hula hoop, let's get to it. So the argument would be how the hips turn. We believe that there should be some tilt to go together with the turn on both halves of the swing. So in the Austin swing, we go ahead and we allow the right hip to get outside the ankle so that we can put a little bit of tilt in my belt line here, and that enables the left shoulder to go down to the ball more. As opposed to if I were to just turn the hips, you see that my hips and shoulders would turn more flat. And using the hula hoop, I want to show you exactly why I think you'd get an advantage over doing it the first way, the tilt and the turn. Let's take a look at this. Let's consider if I turn this way, take a posture, and I'm going to try to place the back of my neck, or the 7th cervical vertebrae, I'm going to try to place it in the center of this circle. You'll see, if I were to just turn, so you can see through the hoop now. And of course, if I go this way, to get back to the ball again properly, I'm probably going to have to do a reverse of this and turn opposite the other direction. Now there you can see again on the downswing, you can see through the hoop again. Looking at it from the front facing, I want to point out that when I do just turn the hip, see, I've actually got more weight on my front foot right now than my back foot. And you see my head has swayed, and it's now positioned more over my back foot than in the center of my stance. So that would be what I would call the two disadvantages of simply making a flat hip turn during the swing. Instead, I think I'd like to show you that having an equal amount or so, or equal proportion of tilt and turn in the hips is going to make this hoop move in a really different fashion. So again, I'll try to position my back of my neck right in the center of the circle here. Now, if I move what I say is the Austin pivot, which has a tilt and a turn, as we allow the bottom of the spine to swing freely from side to side or foot to foot, I think you're going to see that you'll never be able to see through the hoop this way. The hoop is simply rotating on its own axis. Now as I start into the downswing, again, you'll never see through the hoop, you'll just be looking at the side of the hoop this way. Now, since we're looking for a swing plane, something like this. Of course, this is a small circle version of it, but you can see we've got this tilted hula hoop going right through the ball, and of course, where the bottom of the hoop is touching the mat, it's the tangent is my target line. So this would be, you know, like the Hogan pane of glass that you see in his book, in Hogan's 5 Lessons book. Really often used analogy. If we're going to make the club head move something like on this plane, because it doesn't move exactly like this, but this is a good image, and this is what we're kind of shooting for here. It would be much more helpful to keep the hips and the shoulders in what I call a wheel, turning always parallel to what I'm trying to get the club head to do. See, I would say that I'd have to do much less manipulating of the the arms and hands in order to keep the club shaft and the club head moving somewhat on this wheel. And you could see the disadvantage. Going to switch out from the hoop to the club for a second. So I'm going to make that first motion I showed you, just a flat hip turn, and you can see what's going to happen here is the club is going to want to go way to the inside. So not only do I have more weight on my front foot, my head's out of position, but now the club has sought a very, very inside arc, too far inside, and I'll really have to do a lot of turning back the other way in order to get the club back on line again. So it's a real moving target. Of course, golfers will often make a second error who do this. They'll turn the hips flat and then separate the arms. Now you have the arms going on a completely different wheel than the body is turning on. So if we were to do this, again, I'll show you. If we don't have simply a turn of the hips, but we have a tilt and turn of the hips, we get the hoop going back really parallel on a wheel parallel to that what we want the arms and the club to move on. Just like this. I'll go back and forth a couple times now. Just like that. Notice that I needed to maintain that same 30-degree bend at the hip in order to keep the wheel on line. Let's go back to the club again. And let's take a look at what I would say the Austin way of doing things. So same setup. And now, as I start to pivot back, and I just let the shoulders simply respond to what the hips are doing. And right about here is when I first start to wind up the wrists to here. Now you see I'm in really good shape here. And I have not had to make my arms, set my arms on a different wheel in order to make the whole thing look like it's straight, but you've got all these conflicts going on between the body parts that I think would make it a little bit harder to be consistent. So what this wheel is going to give you when you operate the Austin pivot like this, you're going to see the belt line is going to tilt, and since the spine is just perpendicular to those hips, your shoulders are pretty much going to follow what your hips do. So you're going to get a little bit steeper look out of the shoulders rather than more of a flat look. As we swing the hips to the right, we think that gets us loaded up on the back foot better than simply turning alone. Allows us to step down and really plant weight into the ground, what I think is a superior way to just turning alone. And we are turning as well. We may just not be turning the hips as much in either direction. We're a little bit more side to side and a little bit more less around. We're looking for that blend. So something like this, and then something like this. So I'm giving the bottom of my spine some freedom to swing back and forth. I utilize that in conjunction with my knees and heels to send the weight from side to side as I'm staying on that wheel. So we think that it's going to give you a little bit more power for the fact that you are, like a baseball pitcher would be, stepping home, striding home, giving him some linear velocity and pushing down with a greater amount of force coming off that mound laterally at the pitcher. And then we're wheeling and turning and snapping. Very similar to what we're trying to do with the Austin pivot here, similar to the way you would throw a ball. So we think more power, but also since the wheel, switch back again, since the wheel is staying on line, what it's also going to produce is a very straight swing plane and a very straight club path. So you'll get to, a lot more tendency to start the ball down the middle when your club path is straight. If we want to hit a ball really straight, we've got to have the path straight, the club face straight, and the contact in the center. So this is one of the three keys that you can't escape on how to hit a shot really straight. So I think overall, once you're able to turn the hips and shoulders this way, I think it really gives you the best of both worlds. Not easy to change over to this style if you have been in the turning, but it's definitely worth the effort. So one more point about swinging the hips in this fashion that I'm prescribing to you, this way instead of this way, is that once you go this way, we believe that spinning back around this again, we think puts a little bit more negative, injurious style forces on the lower back and also in the knee joint on the left side too, as the knee joint has to slam straight to get the hips back around far enough again, as evidenced by Cameron Champ, who swings very hard in this rotating manner and has already suffered some fairly serious lower back injuries very young in life. We think that this is a little bit safer on the back joints. Don't have any scientific data behind it yet, just the movement itself we think is going to tend to baby the lower spine just a bit more. So I want you to give some thought on your next trip to the range on how your hips are moving. Of course, you've seen other videos on my channel where I advocate practicing your Austin pivot against a wall. But, if you want to just stop in at the toy store the next time you go past, or maybe at the dollar store, they might have a really cheap hula hoop. And this would make it very helpful of a device for you to check and see that you are doing whatever pivot style you're using, that you don't have too much, rocking. Mike said that the less rocking that we would have on our plane as we went back and through, the more consistently we could deliver the club square to the ball on a straight path. So the way you move your hips in short is, really, really important, because it sets the table for how the shoulders are going to move and therefore your arm path and your swing plane. So we want to get that basic hip move down just right, because I really want to see you hit it out there long and straight. Hey, I hope you got some value out of this video. If you did, please consider liking and hitting the subscribe button. If I don't see you in the next video, hopefully I'll see you longer and straighter down the fairway.